Remember the Forgotten.
Chapter 1. Swindled Silver. Zircon stood on the edge of a dark street. The uneven stone cobbles beneath him threatened to topple his balance as he took a deep breath and turned his anticipatory gaze northwards. Staring up the subtle slope that the city around him was built upon, he looked upon innumerable stone and wooden buildings rising up against the horizon. The city's keep standing tallest at the peak of it all, a pillar of rock against the dark brown sky. This was the city of Tinvernet, a thriving hub of trade and progression during the day, and a dark, depressing slum by night. Zircon, of all people, knew his place very well. His hood covering most of his face, he stepped forward, shrouded in the shadows of the run-down blocks surrounding him, and toward a large, flat building with bright yellow light streaming through the cracks in its door. Muffled voices could be heard from within, boisterous and rowdy. Zircon walked up to it, took yet another deep breath, and pushed the door open. The bright light and loud noise of the popular tavern would have hit Zircon like a brick had he not been so used to it. Wooden tables were scattered around the large space, an uneven square room, with pale floorboards, dark wooden beams, and rectangular alcoves that harboured even more people out of sight, all lit by the flaring torches mounted on the wall. The place was packed, with almost every table housing a group of people loudly chatting and downing flagons of ale. A single man stood behind the bar towards the back, dressed in a fine shirt and waistcoat, keeping a constant flow of alcohol to his thirsty patrons. Zircon pulled down his hood, letting his long black hair fall to his shoulders past his pale face, and looked around for a group of people to make his targets. Many factors went into his search: how much money they appeared to have, how desperate they seemed to be for more, and above all, how stupid they looked. Zircon looked towards a table near the bar first, where a number of well-dressed men, wearing long, blue overcoats of the Hillmaven fashion, feasted on large plates of expensive food. With little expectation of success, he strode over, silently under the din of conversation, to stand right behind them, and coughed quietly to draw their attention. One of the larger men, with slick hair and a well-groomed beard, turned to look, his eyes half closed in a lazy display of disdain. "We're not interested," he said. Zircon spun on his heels in a smooth motion, quickly departing their table and scowling as soon as he faced away. "Bloody Hillmaveners," he muttered under his breath. In the farthest corner of the tavern, his eyes were quickly drawn to another group of people. Large, shouty men, downing their drinks so fast they got as much on their clothes as they did in their mouths. Clearly less wealthy, Zircon observed, but plenty abundant in his third desirable trait. He had found his marks. He approached the handful of men, taking a small wooden box from his large pocket and placing it down on their table. The men stared up at him confusedly. He stared right back, with a sly but charming grin painted on his smooth face. "Would you gentlemen perhaps be interested in a game of chance?" The men were silent for a moment, first processing the words, then considering them, while looking about between each other, until, finally, the middle one eagerly hit the table with his fist and let out a far too loud chuckle. "Go on then, laddie," he shouted. Zircon smirked and slithered down into an empty chair at their table. He opened his box and pulled out 3 silver coins. "The rules are simple," he explained, picking up the coins in between his fingers and displaying them on each side. "As you can see, one of these coins is double-sided. All you have to do, and I'm sure this will be a simple task for discerning men such as yourselves, is follow the double-sided coin with your eyes as I shuffle them all head side up. When I'm done, simply point it out to me. If you get it right, the coin is yours." The men nodded their heads, grinning greedily and rubbing their fingers together. "There are 5 of us," one said to the others. "We can't lose." "Get started then," another one shouted, clearly eager to get going. "Why, of course," smiled Zircon. "Before we start, though, you must offer up a silver piece for me to have, should you fail to point out the correct coin. A good gamble must have risk, after all." Yeah, dismissed the man, flipping a silver coin on his finger to land flat just in front of Zircon. He responded with a grin. "Then let us begin." Zircon put 3 coins down on the rough wooden surface of the table and placed his fingertips on each. Suddenly, his hands began to move, quickly becoming a blur as he started to flip coins from one finger to another, shuffling them lightning fast while the men's eyes darted between them dizzily. Then the coins slowed to a stop, loudly scraping sound against the table as Zircon finally released his hold. He looked up at the men, pleased with himself. "Make your choice." One man, with no hesitation, bellowed out, "The middle one!" The others looked towards him, impressed. Zircon lifted the coin, revealing the standard tree-like engraving of the coin's backside. "Greg!" the middleman shouted, suddenly glaring at his friend. "You fool! You're paying for that one!" Greg leaned over and squinted at the coin, a look of disbelief on his face. "Damn it! I was so certain it was that one!" "Afraid not," smiled Zircon, palming the gambled coin and slipping it smoothly into his pocket. "Another round, perhaps?" Against their better judgment, the men continued for several games. Zircon circling the coins around the table, the men becoming more and more fevered with each silver piece lost. "Bloody hell!" one exclaimed, after the 7th game, banging his fist on the table in frustration. "I've lost half my fucking rent this week. I'm sure to win this time though, right, lads?" As Zircon grinned to himself, looking from punter to punter, awaiting whoever would be next, he all of a sudden heard a deep, gravelly voice whisper right into his ear from behind him. A shiver ran down his spine. "No swindling in my bar," it demanded. Zircon didn't turn around to see who it was. He didn't need to. It was the barkeep, he was sure, and his heavy footsteps had already continued walking past to serve other customers. Once he was gone, Zircon steadied himself, hoping the men hadn't heard. "Well, I think you all might have had enough for one night," he smiled again, diplomatically reaching out to retrieve his coins. Suddenly, one of the men, Greg, threw his heavy arms over the table to encompass the coins, knocking over multiple drinks in the process and dragging it all away before Zircon could even try and stop him. He had no time to think. "Thief! Thief!" shouted Zircon, lurching up from his chair and knocking it over backwards as he pointed dramatically toward the man who had swiped his coins. A few heads in the tavern turned at his outburst, but not nearly enough. Greg showed the coins to his friends, growling, "None of them are double-sided." Uh-oh. Zircon went to run, but one of the men launched forward and grabbed his hood from all the way over the table. He was pulled backwards, landing on the floor with a thud and a crack. He let out a pained breath and looked up, feeling dazed as the men stood up from their seats and stepped around the table to quickly loom over him. As they surrounded Zircon with clenched fists, their shadows crossed his body and eventually left him in sudden and uncomfortable dimness. He offered a weak smile, unable to fully hide his terror. Now, gentlemen," he groaned. "I'm sure we can work this out like civilized." Thump! Zircon's speech was swiftly cut off as a kick connected with his side. He instinctively curled up, just as another hard boot connected with the back of his head. He unsteadily rolled over and put his face in his hands, letting out an involuntary whimper as the blows continued to come. He closed his eyes, not knowing what else to do, and hoped that it would all be over quickly. The rest was a blur of pain and screams before, finally, mercifully, it all went dark.